Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Ordinary Time. I'm Brandon Forshino, and today I'm coming to you from Queen of Angels Catholic Bookstore in Mandarin, Florida, or Jacksonville, Florida. What do we call this place, Christy? Is it Mandarin? Is it Jacksonville?
Yes.
Well, we're here today at the Queen of Angels Catholic Bookstore here in Jacksonville, Florida. Very unique place to record an interview for the podcast. We have not been to a bookstore yet, but the reason we're here today is because I'm interviewing a friend, Jacqueline Brown, who is an amazing Catholic fiction author who's written so many amazing books. She has 3 series. The first is the Light series, which is 5 books. She has another trilogy, The Awakening, and she has a 3rd book, and I think some more books that are coming soon. Mm-hmm. We're going to let Jacqueline talk a little bit more about that, but thank you for joining us. Without further ado, let me introduce you to today's guest, Jacqueline Brown. Jacqueline, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Are you kidding me? This is awesome.
It is
Shout
awesome.
out to Christy for letting us be here today.
Yeah, it's my favorite bookstore by far.
My favorite bookstore too. Absolutely. We both have books in this bookstore now.
We do, yeah, which is probably what makes it our favorite bookstores.
You have ownership rights to this place. You've been here a lot longer than I have.
Yeah. I think 7 years, 8 years.
Wow. Yeah,
9 years? 9 years.
She's the king of the hill. I need to be careful I encroach this space when I come in here.
Yep, it's great.
Holy grounds for you. It's really great to have you. We've had so many opportunities to talk to one another. I've really enjoyed getting to know you. You have a very unique concept for a Catholic fiction series. I mean, it's truly timely, if you ask me, for where we are headed in the world in a lot of ways. But when I think of Catholic books or Catholic authors, my mind usually goes to like the Scott Hahn and the Keith Nestor and the Devin Schott. You know, you get a lot of scholarly, deep, impactful books.
Right, and then you get mine.
And then you get Jacqueline's. But let's talk about that. So let's start with, maybe give us a little summary about the books that you write, your style, kind of introduce us to these different series. I hope I didn't butcher the introduction at all.
No, that's correct.
That's and disclaimer, if you're watching today's episode, we are here at the bookstore. There are customers coming in and out. This is a very unique episode, so just be patient with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I set out not necessarily wanting to write. I just, the Lord kind of called me to write, and I really believe that. But when I sat down and kind of retrospectively looked backwards, I realized that I was really trying to reach people that maybe would not gravitate towards a Scott Hahn book at this stage of their faith journey. Or maybe they would, but they want something a little bit lighter, a little bit more fun, but that would also be consistent with the faith and hopefully add. My hope is that little seeds are planted, right? So wherever we are in our faith journey, that we move a little bit further along. And so I always tell people I wrote books for the devout Catholic and the completely non-religious person at the same time. And I think I have achieved that based on reviews and things. I think I'm able to meet people where they are. And I've heard from religious sisters in convents that love my books. And I've heard from 12-year-old boys that are maybe 13-year-old boys who are struggling in whatever they're struggling with, but have said, you know, your books have really, really helped me. So those are the same books, and I find that amazing that those books through the gift of the Holy Spirit have been able to help or reach people at such different journeys in their faith.
So before we get into a summary of the different 3, right now 3 series, let's back up for a second, because I think what I have found most fascinating about your biography, and I think what contributes to your actual authorship, is the background. You kind of come from a children's psychologist.
I'm a clinical psychologist, and I worked my last grown-up job was working with girls and young women who had either been in the criminal justice system or were at risk of entering the criminal justice system. I sort of accidentally ended up focusing and specializing in trauma. So it was really heavy work, really fulfilling, enriching work, really loved that work, which is why when the Lord called me to do this, I was really surprised. You know, I was like, I have a PhD over in this field. Would you like to use that, maybe? And he said, no, thank you. And I would like for you to do this. And so there was a lot of discernment that happened for me, even stepping out into that of writing. But Yes, I was absolutely, I think what helps me write good characters, and I hear that from my readers, is that they really like the characters and they really like the development of those characters. Absolutely is my psychology background, and just maybe the ability to see people from all different angles, perhaps, and understand that, you know, the person that you're seeing on the outside is probably different than the person that's on the inside. And so as a writer, I'm able to maybe think a little bit more about the person on the inside and how did they get to that spot on the outside. So
That's fascinating. And when you say that call, let's talk about the calling, because you know, one of the things I like in someone's call or to a vocation or to any calling or purpose in life, you can kind of see it manifest in like the burning bush moment. There's a pretty significant event that takes place, or there might be the still small voice in the mountaintop where, you know,
that
what was
road
the
to
calling?
Damascus.
Yeah, what was the calling for you? Because that's a huge transition and shift.
Yeah,
like,
it was.
Talk
It
a
was
little bit
hard.
about that process.
Yeah, so the calling actually, so I never wanted to be a writer. So when I hear people that say, oh, I've always known I wanted to be a writer, I'm like, that's amazing. I feel like I'm consistently changing career paths, you know, throughout my life. I've gone from, I wanted to be a business major, and when I was getting my bachelor's, which is laughable now, and then I wanted to maybe be a lawyer, and then to psychology, and then actually followed through with that, did that for many, many years. And then when I was 30, decided I think I'd like to write a book. And so I did, and it was horrible. Like, it was an awful book. And I gave it to my 5 best friends, and they either didn't read it, or it's still unclear to me if they actually just didn't read it, or if they all just agreed it was so bad that they were just going to say, yeah, I didn't read that. So my husband's the only one that read it, and he's like, it's just really depressing. And so I put that down. We became parents, so I got way busier than I'd ever been before. You know, when you hear people, you know, with kids, like when you hear people who are working and don't have kids and they think they're busy, it sort of makes you giggle, right? Because you're like, wow, just wait till you have kids, because
That's right.
you will not be sitting on the couch and watching TV. That will never happen to you again. But so the book was bad, put it away, and then got much, much busier. Professionally, my career really started to just flourish. I was so fulfilled, enjoying my work so much. I was doing some, I mean, it's strange as a psychologist, but I was doing some kind of higher profile cases in the Jacksonville area. And so I was just getting really well known, and I could have continued on that path for forever. And it was before we got our second son, so our kids are all adopted. So when I say got, did not give birth to, but got our second son, I started Jonah and Bria, who are the main characters for the Light series, popped into my head, and we got him. And I went from 1 toddler to 2 toddlers, boys, super active. Really thought I was going to lose my mind. And then about 6 months went by, life got a little bit calmer, and Jonah and Bria reappeared. And I, as they continued in my mind, I got to the point where they were so present that I felt like I would either need to go to counseling or write about it, because they wouldn't leave. And I'm a discovery writer, which just means I don't know what's going to happen until I write it. Which is probably not the best way to write a book. Ideally, you kind of know what's going to happen, but it's always a surprise to me, which is fun. But so they were just standing in the same spot on a frozen highway with a broken down car, these 2 people, and I'm like, who are these people? Why are they in my head? They need to leave. And I had been doing Christ Renews His Parish, if you're familiar with that. So I did that. And so I was in the a beautiful habit of like nightly scripture reading, nightly prayer, and just kept taking it to prayer. And the answer just kept being right. And I kept saying no. And then during Lent of 2015, I finally said, okay, fine, I'm going to do it. And then when I said fine, the self-doubt just was a wave, you know, like it crushed me. And so it took a couple months, probably, if I look back at the dates, it was probably through Lent until we get to Easter, because in May of 2015, I finally just gave up on the self-doubt and said, I'm just going to write this book. And it was done by Thanksgiving.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fast forward, you have 9 books.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, so good encouragement to those who are doubting the call.
Right.
You should probably feel uncomfortable. If you're not uncomfortable, it's probably not the right thing, right?
Yeah, I think that's probably a good point.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I can personally attest to that.
Yep.
So let's start with this first series, which is what you're best known for.
Yes.
It's a best-selling series, the Light series, 5 books in that series. Let's talk a little bit about it. A little bit of a, we call it maybe an apocalyptic style.
Post-apocalyptic. Yep.
Yeah, let's talk about that. There's a lot of people interested in post-apocalyptic.
Yeah.
People probably think we're headed for that direction right now, right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, it's interesting. I always get readers that are like, oh, you're prophetic. I'm like, I'm really not. Like, that's not.
That's a scary thing to say.
It is a scary thing to say. The only part of it that was really interesting to me was I wrote all these books before COVID. And in the third book, I think, second or third book, there is an illness. And I didn't know what the illness was, but I described it as a sort of a tuberculosis-like illness that, starts with incredible fatigue and people of all ages are dying. And so it was sort of interesting that when COVID came, that I was like, wow, that was weird.
We should probably stop writing books.
It was weird. It was strange. It was strange. Yeah.
We don't want anything else to manifest here.
Yeah. But back to your question. So yeah, it's post-apocalyptic. But it's immediate post-apocalyptic, because sometimes when you read post-apocalyptic literature, it's happening decades or centuries in the future. And I was really curious about what would happen if it happened on my way home from work. And so you see these college students on their way to a Thanksgiving break. And so they're driving down the road. It's the eve of Thanksgiving, and the United States gets hit by, spoiler alert, EMPs, several of them. And it takes down our power grid, but it takes down our cell phones. And they were strong enough to take out cars as well. Any of the electrical components would be fried. And so mechanical, super old cars would still work, but all of our current day cars would be dead. And so here's these college kids who have grown up in our current day, who certainly have no understanding of maybe real life, who are all of a sudden left on the side of a deserted highway in the middle of what's going to be a big blizzard. And what's beautiful is the college students, the narrator, Bria, is an atheist, and then meets these other brother and sister, Bria and his sister East, and they take them to their home, and the journey kind of unfolds from there. So we start there in North Carolina, but we end up back in Washington, D.C., and then we end up back in North Carolina, and then we end up back in Washington, D.C., and Washington, D.C., and just that journey. And so I didn't really focus. I focused a little bit in the 5th book on sort of where we are as a nation, but for the most part I was more interested in, this is just an ordinary person. So what would an ordinary person do in this moment? And then how would the family who Jonah and East come from a very devout family who have had a lot of crosses, but definitely have internalized their faith, right? So it's not sort of some sort of show, it's legitimate. And so how would a very devout family respond in that way? So even though they've only got a limited amount of food, are they going to let these 4 kids, freeze and die? Because clearly they would have died. They would not have survived at all. But this family brings them in, teaches them how to survive, and loves them and supports them, and it's just a really nice story, I think.
So the standout question in all of this, through the entire series, is who would you become if the world fell away? Right? Which is such a beautiful question to consider, not even from a fictional storyline, but I think so applicable in our faith life. Was that a big driver for you in that being kind of the
tagline?
The tagline?
Yeah, that was a complete Holy Spirit moment. So whenever people tell me, I really love your books or whatever, I'm like, great, thank you, that's the Holy Spirit. Because I truly, again, I didn't train to be a writer. I didn't study writing. I didn't want to be a writer. So it's very easy for me to point back to the Lord and say, this is all his work. The stuff that you don't like in the books, I take full credit for that. That's all me. The stuff that speaks to you or is well written or whatever it might be, that is absolutely from the Lord. So the who do you become when the world fall away, I mean, that just kind of popped in my head. And when it did, I was like, oh, thanks. I appreciate that. That was a good answer to what should the tagline be. And it has been absolutely a perfect tagline, and it does. It fits both, sort of concretely with their circumstances. The world has fallen away. They've lost everything, the lights, everything that they would have relied on, that we all rely on. But it is also very much with the characters themselves, right? So Bria's on a massive journey of self-discovery, and who is she, and where does she really come from, and who were her parents really, and the wounds that she has, and then how does she become the person that God created her to be. And it really is, I think we're all asked to let the world fall away and figure out who we truly are, and have that moment, or those many moments of silence to find that. And I think when the world actually becomes silent, as it did in this series, I feel like in some ways it would make it easier, right, for us to really recognize who we are, what's important. Obviously, that'd be a really hard way to get there. I would prefer to just have silence and just turn off the computer for a little bit or turn off the phone.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You know, it's funny. I was talking to a friend recently, and he's going through a pretty rough time, and we were talking about ways to get through this time, and I had suggested, why don't you spend some time in some silence? And the thought of him being alone in silence was actually more terrifying than what he was enduring. And I thought about just how dependent we've become on technology. Personally, I've had to fast from all forms of media unless it's necessary, and that's very hard for me because a part of what I do for a living is media.
Right.
But avoiding unnecessary media, because the way I think about it is just the way it fills your mind.
Yeah.
It's not good.
No.
It really isn't, especially with the tragic events that have taken place, from Charlie Kirk's assassination to school shootings and political division, and it's just, the more that we tune in, the further it takes us away from the real source of life. To me, it's like we chase these mirages in a desert, and we think we're looking and getting closer to something that's true and meaningful, and we're going to get to the bottom of this and that, when reality is it's just bringing us further in desolation, further from any real source of life.
Consolation.
And so that question, who will we become when the world falls away? I love that you talk about this concept of, the importance of letting life fall away. Jesus talks about it all the time about, giving up your life. Whoever loses his life will actually gain it. The first will be last, the last will be first. And a particular gospel that I really love lately is when he takes the child and says, see this child. And he talks about those who enter the kingdom must be like a child. And I think about, as you with your adopted children, or me with my children, what do we learn about our children? There's one, the innocence, of course, but more importantly, they have no problems. You talk about being a discovery writer. Children are discovery based. They're constantly wanting to know why and what and how. And they're also not afraid to come to you when there's something wrong.
Right.
You're the first person they want when things have gone wrong, when they've gotten hurt. And so when the world falls apart and falls away, you talk about an identity crisis, right? So your characters in this book kind of show this identity crisis. There's a crisis happening in the world. We can learn a lot about ourselves in those moments, but I think we both know that what we ultimately learn is that the Lord never leaves us or forsakes us.
Right.
And that's sometimes the greatest, the gifts of devastation are probably the best gifts we can receive.
Right. And I would say, as we're maybe tempted to delve down those rabbit holes of the various news cycles, I mean, to some extent, yes, you need to be informed, but at another extent, I don't know that we were really made to know about every news happening across the globe at every given minute.
Or
see it.
Happen.
I don't. If you think about how we were created obviously for community, but that community probably was not meant to be global in that moment, right? So I tell people who are struggling with that to maybe try to refocus on your local community and people that you actually know, and try to really focus and love them.
Yeah.
And certainly pray for the rest of the world, but to be overly focused on kind of these external happenings that you really have no control over, unless you, I mean, we always pray about it, and that gives us not control, but some level of influence, I think. But unless you are sort of an elected leader, you don't really need, like, there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, what can we actually do?
Nothing.
Yeah, I heard somebody say this the other day. Ironically, it was a social media video, but in this case, it was a good one.
Sure.
It was a pastor who was talking about, men, parents, you're so worried about what's going on in the world, and you're yelling at your nightly news station.
Right.
You think you have all the answers, you're going to change it. Meanwhile, your children are in the room being groomed by TikTok on the iPad, consuming K-pop demon hunters, and you have no idea what's going on with your own house, and yet you're so worried about everything else that's going on. You brought up COVID. COVID was probably one of the greatest things that happened to, I think, the small society, the small village approach. As parents, you hear it takes a village to raise your children. I think about that phrase. Well, quite literally, that's what it was. It was villages. We tents next to each other. Everyone was together.
Right.
Think about the mental break you have of knowing that, someone's gone for the day, but you've got the entire village that's right there with you. When everything shut down for us in the pandemic, it was the first time that neighbors came outside and looked at each other in the eyes, and we had community. We were having, barbecues together. We were out in the driveway. The kids were playing. There was no desire to be on technology because why not?
Why would you? Yeah.
So there's something to be said about what you brought up about that community, and really coming back to the essence of what it means to have a village. It takes a village. Well, how do we know our neighbors? And even the Gospels are very clear about, the community we're called to serve.
Yes.
And I feel like, we want the big fish, the big ponds, let's go get more people, and we fail to recognize
the little people in
the
your
little
house.
or the people right in front of us.
Right.
Think about your greeters on Sunday when you go to Mass. They're, are they really focused on you, or are they looking behind you at the next person to greet?
I think they're focused on me.
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we hope so, at
We hope
least,
so,
that we get the right greeters.
Yeah.
But at times, it can be like that. It's,
Sure.
we're always thinking past the person in front of us as someone new that we can reach. I love that. No. So let's talk about this second series. And so let's talk about, the Awakening series. It's a trilogy, so 3 books in this version.
Yep.
So the concept here is you leave readers wondering if there's more to life than what can be easily seen. So how do you hope that this series encourages spiritual reflection?
Yeah, so this series came because I was talking to a friend of mine who is, I guess maybe agnostic at best. I'm not exactly sure, to be honest. And she had said, if I saw, I'm trying to remember, this was several years ago, but if I saw, I was reading a book about like exorcism or something like that. And I was kind of trying to tell her things about that. And she said, if I ever saw somebody actually levitate or do one of these things, I would have to rethink my entire worldview. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting? So if you saw evil, like true evil manifesting in a very concrete way, you would have to rethink your worldview, because currently you don't believe in evil. And so presumably if you believed in evil, you would have to believe in God, right? Like, so if you could see evil, you'd have to believe in God. And so I thought, well, what would it be like then if I had characters who could see evil, who could feel evil? So that is really the premise of this book. So it's spiritual warfare, spiritual thriller, and it's, again, young adult. And all my books are squeaky clean, and there's no cursing. There is, I've heard like the word gritty, I've heard the word intense, I've heard, so it keeps you on the edge of your seat. I hear that word a lot, fast-paced, but appropriate for, again, it's a clean read. So, but I have, these 2 young people, and in this case, Luca is the young man, and he can feel evil. And so what does that look like? And he was raised in a home, spoiler alert, but his mom was a psychic, right? So what does that look like? Well, he watched the sort of evolution of her downfall. Yeah. And he felt it, like literally in his body, viscerally in his body, he felt it. And so what did that do to him, and what does that do going forward? And then when he's introduced to the Catholic faith, if he can feel evil, he can feel good, and so he is automatically drawn to the Eucharist, and just he's like, what is that? What is that? And so it's a beautiful story with some demons, but I downplay the demon part in the sense because I didn't really never want to be in the head of a demon. So that part of it is downplayed. But as the story goes on, I was really interested in kind of intergenerational trauma as a psychologist, and so kind of this spiritual intergenerational trauma, if you will, that happens, and I'm sort of intrigued by that in the sense of, I feel as though I get a lot of benefit from my ancestors that have passed on, that are continuing to pray for me. And I think about, well, what's happening now for people whose, I think about, we've got family members that I think my husband and I are kind of the only people who are praying for them, and because we're the only people that are religious. And so that didn't used to be the case, right? So generations ago, you would have had pretty much everybody praying for you up in heaven if they died and if they went to heaven and all of that. And I just think, what is that happening as we get further and further kind of in this, what some are calling and many are calling probably appropriately this post-Christian era that we live in, that less and less people even have ever been to church. And so I find that intriguing, I guess, academically intriguing. And so these characters had a lot of who are Catholic now, but they had a lot of darkness in their past. And so how has that kind of played into their current circumstances? And how do we get through that? And then the last book in the series, Haunted, which just came out, was really heavily influenced by, again, I think it's an intriguing concept, but it's the Joyful Friar podcast. I don't know if you've ever heard that one. It's interesting, and he is I cannot remember the order that he is in, but it's just he is sort of, his superior has given him the okay and all of that to help these souls who are in purgatory that need help. And it's basically, he's a therapist kind of for them. And again, as a psychologist, I find that super, super intriguing. And so that aspect comes into play a lot in Haunted. And then I think we all have spiritual gifts, right? And so it's just, as we get further along the faith journey, we might feel them or see them or sense them differently. And so we start out in the beginning with Luca and his spiritual gifts, and he kind of doesn't even know what they are. He's just like, kind of, what is happening to me? But then as we get further along, Sienna, who's the young girl from the Catholic family, starts realizing that she also has gifts, and what does that look like? And so it's her figuring out her own spiritual gifts and how to use those for the greater good of God, and not fall into the trap of kind of Luca's mom with the psychic and all of that. So, and divination and those practices. But how do we actually follow the Lord with the gifts that he gives us, but follow the Lord, right? So what does that look like? So.
Well, you went right down the path I was really interested in. Is with this particular trilogy, I was curious how your clinical background as a psychologist played into this, because when I think about, any kind of spiritual warfare, I immediately attach that to, maybe the stuff that you're talking about is it's demonic, right?
Right.
So a lot of the psychological stuff that we can maybe see, it's hard for me to just be content with that's just a disorder, that's just a mental illness, right? Where, no, I feel like we're just completely downplaying there's a spiritual warfare side of what the Gospels and the Scriptures are very clear about. Jesus, when he went on his mission and he journeyed through villages, the people that we read about in the Gospels who were chained up because they were, or they were cutting themselves, or the young boy who wanted to constantly try to throw himself in the fire.
Right.
These are all examples of today what we see. We just diagnose as mental illness.
Right.
The temptation to jump off of a cliff. Satan literally trying to get Jesus to do that. Right. When I think about that, I think about it from a psychological standpoint. What about also generational curses? Because we hear about.
Yeah, I try to address that a little bit in that series. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's another phenomena, right? Like, coming from, maybe the spiritual warfare we feel or we face is not necessarily the direct result of something we participated in, but the generations that's gone before us too, right?
Yeah, and I tried to, I think for writing for me is such a fun sort of thought exercise, and trying to figure things out in my own head. And I always laugh that you can kind of see my own spiritual progression. I mean, I'm usually just like a tiny step ahead of my characters. And you can really see where I was in 2016 when I wrote The Light, and then now where I am in, I guess, 2025 with, you haven't seen it yet, but Unaltered, which is coming out hopefully in 2026. But it's a lot of fun to try to comprehend things. And I talked with a priest friend of mine, and I was trying to understand a concept, and he's like, but the closer you get to understanding, the less you're going to understand. And I was like,
it's deep.
All right, true.
Very
So
good.
it was good, and it was helpful for me to understand that mystery is part of our faith. And so when I'm wrestling with certain specific concepts, like, that's appropriate. I'm supposed to wrestle with those because it's confusing. Like, we don't understand God. We're never going to understand God. But yeah.
So then you just alluded to it. So you have this Altered series, which is you have book 1, and you have a future book coming out. Is it going to be book 2 of this series?
It will be. I have a small book of short stories coming out hopefully by Christmas. And then, so Altered is just straight up dystopian, young adult. There's no mention of God. And I did that on purpose, but I find it actually really hard to do because it is incredibly Christian, incredibly pro-life with no mention of the Lord, which is hard for me to not kind of go there. But in the short stories I have gone there. So it's good.
So why did you decide for this Altered series to do this, to go this direction? And I'm guessing obviously you want to reach a bigger audience.
Exactly. Yeah. I wanted it to be a little bit more mainstream. And it's fun, right? I wanted to experiment. I wanted to see if I could do it. I was influenced a lot by, for this particular book, Lois Lowry's The Giver. And I realized I can't just write one book. Like, that was one book. And so even though there is like a quartet, like there are other books, but that was a standalone. And so I just wanted to see, could I do this? And so that book takes place in our future, and I would envision it maybe like 60 years in the future, not very far in the future. But basically it's this question of what are we going to do with all the embryos that we have through IVF? And I think that's a really important question that we need to figure out, because right now we have artificial wombs that are almost operational. They are operational for animals, right? So we're getting really close. We have China coming out with gestation robots. So you pay for a robot. I don't know if you rent or you buy a robot, a gestation robot, and then you put your embryo into this robot, and then you get a baby 9 months later. So the theory goes.
This is the book.
No, this is real life.
You're kidding me.
No, I'm not. This is real life. This is happening right now.
Where have I been? See, this is what happens when you fast from unnecessary media and entertainment.
Yeah.
This is why I'm not on the media. This is wild.
This is wild. It's absolutely wild. So Altered came out a couple years ago, and I'm like, And when it came out, people were like, this is really far-fetched.
Yeah, I'm still there. I'm still thinking this is far-fetched.
Yeah. So, but when Altered came out, where I had gestation machines and basically the gestates, the people born of a machine, embryos from kind of our current IVF era, born of a machine, well, then the question is, well, who owns these children? And I think that's a really legitimate question. I think that's a question that I think our scientists and our ethicists and our legislators really need to start thinking through, because with a machine, what stops a company from implanting an embryo? So right now we think about it as, a person wants a child, but what happens when when a company decides to just do this, and who owns that person?
Are we creating the next army? Is this,
These were our slaves.
Yeah.
So in Altered, this is our new slave race.
Wow.
And we don't call them that, we call them gestates, but we have 3 categories of humans, because gestates aren't people. But we have people who are vintage-borns, which would be all of us, people that were born kind of in the typical natural fashion. Then we have borns, so people that were genetically altered and selected as embryos, but then placed into a female gestate to be born. So they were born of a woman, or a female, and so therefore they are people. But then we have gestates who were born from a machine, and therefore they are humans, but not people.
That is this is fascinating. This
I
is
think
like,
so. I think it's
this
really
to me could be, I mean, I'm sure all of your books could
Yeah.
be movie format, but
Yeah.
this right here is
It's interesting.
very interesting.
Yeah, and that's what I tell people. I'm like, it's truly
and brilliant, by the way. Like, even the 3 types of humanity, categorically speaking, like, wow, that's
Yeah,
fascinating.
it's really interesting. But what I find scary, right, is that now in 2025 we have these gestation robots in China. So we really do, and I think that's what good literature does, especially sort of maybe this. I guess it's science fiction. I feel like true science fiction is way heavier on the sciencey part.
Yeah.
Like they're describing the, I don't know, the sciencey parts of things, and I skip all of that because I'm like, I don't care about that. I
Yeah.
care about what's happening with the people and the characters and the
Well, that's
all
the
of that.
psychological background.
Right. So
Yeah.
I don't care about the fluid that the gestates are gestated in. I mean,
Sure.
I'm sure that's important, but it doesn't make any difference to me. So, but I think that's when we look at sort of science fiction, we often see our future. I mean, how many things on Star Trek do we now
I was
sort of
just going to
see
say,
in
yeah,
real
the
life,
Space
right?
Force.
Right.
We have a Space
Or like
Force.
our watches that talk to us from, oh gosh, Kit was the car, and
Yeah.
David Hasselhoff, and I'm blanking
It's-
on the show, but
It's wild how
Yeah.
much we've seen.
that comes
it's
about in
here.
real life. So,
I mean, cars that drive themselves in Uber that can take
Right.
you places without a driver.
right,
I mean, what's next?
the Jetsons, right.
What you just said is what's next, and that's creepy.
It's
it makes me
creepy,
think
yeah.
of the Tower of Babel.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's almost like
Right.
we're going to have a modern day Tower of Babel scenario that the Lord,
Interesting.
maybe God just sees us all trying to kind of
Yeah, I don't
create a
know.
stairway to heaven and become God. And how does He
Yeah.
disrupt us? I mean, we can't speak any new languages, right?
Right.
But
Right.
there is maybe a spiritual component of this. At what point do we go too far?
Right, and the Lord kind of steps in, and I don't know
Yeah.
what that point would be. So,
And where does the new covenant come into play of, you know,
Yeah.
where this is just waiting for the horse and Jesus with the sword to come back?
yeah,
you
we
know?
just have to be ready. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, so Altered is very much a very, very post-Christian era, but there are kind of conclaves of, or enclaves of, bastions of Christianity. But I don't label it as such. You know, I call them communities, and I don't label that they're Christian. But in the short stories, I get a lot more into. I mean, they're very short stories, but kind of the faith journeys of 2 of the women who are pre-altered. So before altered, before that era existed, well, how did we get here? And so the short stories tell how we got here and who were
Sure.
the key players. And then we see one of those key players in the sequel in Unaltered, and now she's a very different person than she used to be.
So obviously this one doesn't have a true evangelistic theme per se,
Right.
but everything that you write has to have some sort of guiding principle, and there's some
Right.
sort of, right,
Yeah.
there's a goal in mind. So with this series, which is truly fascinating, you know, you're going to reach more people. It's going to maybe bring an awareness to their own psyche of like, oh my gosh, this is actually happening. What would you say is a subconscious goal for you that the reader picking this series up is going to come away from? Do you find that there's an evangelistic component to this? Is there an outcome that you hope to see?
Yeah, I mean, so everything I do is for the greater glory of the Lord. Like,
Yeah.
there's really no point other than that. You know, I've told people, like, I'm good. I'm blessed in my marriage. I'm blessed in my motherhood. I'm blessed in every way. So I do this very much for the Lord. But I also, as I say that, He has shown me that He has given this to me too. So I had kind of foolishly thought for years, I'm doing this for other people. And then when rocky parts of my life hit, I realized this is how I cope. You know, like, so I process the world through my writing.
Wow.
And so I'm really grateful to the Lord for giving me that. Because it's just been such a beautiful way for me to understand life and for me to grow deeper in my relationship with Him. So as much as I love helping others, I have realized it very much helps me too. So I'm grateful for that. But the goal for Altered specifically is just I want people to think. I want people to think about where we are now and where we are going.
Yes.
And so that's my goal for that one.
And you talked about being a discovery writer, which I would just say you're just led by the Holy Spirit, right, in a lot of ways.
Sure.
How does prayer or spiritual reflection play a role in the writing that you do?
So I feel like the Lord, maybe through the Holy Spirit, maybe through my guardian angel, saints definitely are very present and fun to have around. But I feel like they just sort of randomly show me things. And then as I'm writing, I'll be like, oh yeah, I should do that. And so it's just, I feel like I'm this little kid and this spiritual world is sort of like, come on, do this, come on. And I'm really kind of slow on the uptake. And they're trying and they keep sending me these little like snippets. And they're like, okay, she didn't get that one. We got to be louder. And I'm sort of missing a lot of the cues. I'm hopeful that I'm getting a little bit more tuned in and I'm paying a little bit more attention. But I feel like this little kid and the spiritual parents are just probably the saints or whomever are just trying to be like, come on, let's do this, and this is what we want you to do, and this is a good way to tell the story. And I feel like I personally bring very little to the process. I feel like it's really about me listening and trying to understand, how things fit together. So at different points in the writing, in the Light series, you find out in the first book that the parents that you thought were the parents of a young character are actually are different, right? And as I was writing it, I was like, oh my gosh, is that kid really that kid's person, And so it really, truly is a discovery for me too. But it all ties together beautifully. Like, I feel like the Light series, Awakening series, they came together beautifully. And I feel like I kind of like through no help of me, they came together beautifully, so.
As you talk about that, I think about my own ways of writing. I've only written one book. I got a long ways to go.
Yeah.
But it was a really similar process for me. Was, I never saw myself as a writer either. Believe it or not. Like, you can ask my wife. She had to grammatically correct my text messages.
That's what's so funny. I'm like the most grammatically incorrect person ever. I mean, it's really, really funny. Like, I'm horrible with spelling. I'm horrible with commas. Like, my kids are now better than me.
But that goes back to the funny Moses thing. It's, he doesn't, it's honestly become a cliche to me at this point. He doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. Yeah, I get that, and I'm tired of hearing that particular phrase. We need a new one. Right. But the reality is that's true.
It's true, yeah.
And, so going into the process, I remember spending years with multiple different manuscripts for multiple ideas for books, and finally, I just felt like the nudge was just start writing. Stop trying to control the story. Stop trying to control the process. Just do it. And like you, I find that when you just start going, you can almost orient it, and it's like a puzzle. Yeah. It's almost like you're throwing a bunch of puzzle pieces on a table, and you're just kind of figuring it out, and it's fun. It's part of the process, I'm an essentialist, and so what makes a good essentialist is the ability to not just discern what is essential and not essential, but a good essentialist is a good editor, right? A good editor has the ability of not adding, but taking things away, which adds to the life of the story, right? And so for me, that was the best part of the writing process too, is just throwing something together and then not worrying about the end in mind. I had so many people who tried to give me advice. I have lots of friends who are authors, like, write the last chapter first, write the introduction first, write an outline, and all this advice was just not.
I can't outline.
I can't. Like, it's just not for me. I was like, let me just start writing. Yeah. Same thing. If I'm asked to speak in a public setting, I'm worse if I try to plan the speech than just, can you just tell me real time, like, then what do you want me to talk about? We'll do it. Right. I'm going to be much better off that way. Right. And I won't overthink it. But I do love that part of the process too, as a creative in anything that you do, is just, and I think that's a good lesson for life, the spiritual life, which is get out of the way. Right. Right. I think if we just got out of the way, and really invited the Lord into the things He's called us to do, there's a lot. First of all, it takes the pressure off, because now we don't have to be the ones to do it. Right. We just submit and surrender to the divine plan. I do feel a lot of pressure though, because now I've got readers and they're like, when's the next book coming? And
And then you're like, is this book ever? Every single book, I'm like, this is never going to happen. This is never coming out. And then it does. And so I keep reminding myself, like, Jacqueline, you say this every time.
Yeah, 9 books.
We go through this
9
every
books
time.
ago, right? Yeah.
And so I'm like, it's going to come out. But you do start getting a little bit more pressure.
So you talked about this early on, though. You said that your readers, speaking of your readers, that you've heard and seen reviews about how these books have sparked conversations about faith. You know, share 1 or 2 memorable stories from some of the readers.
So one of the funniest kind of like social media posts I got was from a woman who said, my twin 14-year-old grandsons and I are fighting about who gets to read your next book first. And I was like, how often does a grandmother and her twin 14-year-old boys fight about like who's going to read the next book? You know, like that was years ago, and that just really has stuck with me. But I mean, I'm blessed to get beautiful emails from people, beautiful notes from people, beautiful reviews from people, which I always appreciate.
Sure.
I mean, I appreciate all of it, but I think what people really want is they want literature that is both entertaining, well written, so more than both, but entertaining and well written, and will make them think to some extent. I think that I feel like literature is either supposed to be super highbrow, which frankly I detest. I'm like, there was no plot. Like, you just wrote, and you wrote really pretty, but you didn't actually do anything. And anyway, I'm sorry, that drives me nuts. Or there'll be some flaw in it where I'm like, the world got destroyed how many, like, decades ago, and there's an apple rotting on like, that makes no sense. Like,
Sure, very practical.
Like, we have to be practical people. So
that's me when I watch movies, and I'm like, no,
I'm awful.
come on.
Yeah, it's awful. So, but I feel like people want books that are well written, that are entertaining, that are fast paced, but they're also clean reads. Like, we don't need to have a bunch of raunchy, vulgar stuff. There are people who want those books and whatever, but that's not the books that I write, and it's not the books that my readers want to read. And there is a lack of good fiction. I mean, I'll say Christian, there's a huge lack of Catholic fiction. I mean, we are at
You're pioneering this in a lot of
which
ways.
is ridiculous, because there are actually a lot of people who have, I don't want to say I'm pioneering it, but I am doing, I think I'm probably reaching more people, especially maybe more secular people or more non-Catholic people, we'll just say that, than a lot of contemporary Catholic fiction writers. And you know, I am trying to help others and see how we can turn the tide. But it is a little strange that we are here in this spot now, that we don't have more Catholic fiction writers. But it's in part because we don't have Catholic fiction publishers, right? So if you reach out to a traditional Catholic publishing house, they will tell you, or at least they told me years ago, Catholics don't read fiction. And I was like, really? I didn't know that. Okay. So, you know, I've had great success reaching Catholics, reaching non-Catholics, reaching Christians, reaching who obviously are Catholics, but non-denominational, but also, I think, none of the above. And so we're just kind of in a strange spot right now that hopefully the tide will change. And I think it is changing. So my little publishing house, which just publishes me, but we're hosting a contest, and we've gotten some amazing entries. And I'm so excited to see the next generation of Catholic fiction writers and maybe help them a little bit along the journey, but it's really, really neat to see.
Well, so talk about that. So one, in order for someone to check out your book series and all the different books you have a website. I'll put the URL of the website in the description of this video.
Okay.
For those that are local, obviously we would
please
encourage you to come
Queen
see
of Angels.
Queen of Angels.
Yep.
But also, in addition to finding out more about you, learning more about your books. By the way, your book trailers are amazing.
Thank you.
They're very cool.
That was done by a local company in Jacksonville.
We need to talk. I got to get their info. Really cool stuff.
Yeah.
But what I would say is this guild, this writers guild you're talking about, is that still going on? And how long will that be going on for?
Well, so the Catholic Writers Guild is an international organization, and you can go online and learn all about that. And there are some wonderful. They've got they've got writing retreats that you can do. They've got kind of, or more just specific to writing, but then others that are specific to maybe editing or marketing or all these other aspects. And you can do those either, you could do a virtual retreat or you could do it in person. So whatever you need to do for that, but that guild is a super helpful resource.
And then you're having a competition.
And then I have a competition. So that competition actually has closed, but we plan to do it as well next year as well. So we closed on that competition September 1st, and we will reveal the winners before Christmas. So
exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Jacqueline, thank you so much for letting me come to you at this amazing bookstore, Queen of Angels. Christy, we are so grateful for her and letting us come here. In the midst of her, busy operations, she was completely generous to have us come in here. And
Very
I think
kind.
it adds a lot of character to the interview today to know that people are walking around the store. You were an actual author, with the books on the shelf, and here we are talking. I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
But I really am so grateful that you took some time to be on the episode with me today.
My pleasure.
For those of you who are watching today's episode, I hope you found this just as fascinating as I did. And of course, the description for her website, all the ways to get a copy of this book. And once again, if you're local, please make sure to stop into the Queen of Angels Catholic Bookstore and make sure you get a copy in person. But all of the information that we talked about today will be in the show notes below. Thank you guys for tuning in for another episode. I look forward to seeing you for another one soon. Until then, God bless.